things with these people. And finally he entered into the city of Jerusalem, the triumphal entry, and then was crucified about a week later. So this is his last journey. He came to the city of Jericho, an interesting city. It was one of the really beautiful cities of Palestine at that time. It was called the city of palm trees. And even today, when you go to Jericho, there still are a lot of palm trees there, date palms primarily. And when Herod the Great, the Herod who tried to kill all of the babies, you know, in Bethlehem, when Herod the Great was the king, he did a lot of building. And one of the things that he did was to build up the city of Jericho. And he literally made Jericho a great deal like the city of Rome. The architecture was Roman architecture and things like that. And the city turned out to be a very beautiful city. And there were some palaces that he had built for himself. We still, the ruins of those palaces are still around. It was a resort city, a lot of wealthy people there. And this city of Jericho enjoyed a lot of tourist travel and things like this, and the wealthy people would come and bask in the sunlight. Jericho is just a little ways down from a little ways up rather from the Dead Sea. The Jordan River goes right by there, but just before it empties into the Dead Sea. You've all heard of Mark Antony, I know, and Cleopatra. Well, Mark Antony gave Cleopatra the city of Jericho during part of his heyday there in Rome and around the Roman Empire. When Herod died, the prominent Jews of Judea, and particularly in Bethlehem and around in Jericho, they were killed. Herod knew that the people among the Jews hated him, and he did not want to die on a day when everybody just rejoiced. And so he left orders that certain people be killed among the Jews on that day, so that at least there would be somebody who would be mourning on the day of his death. Well, that kind of gives us a picture of the city of Jericho. Jesus is making his way now toward this city. When he was just outside the city, in a big procession, almost like a parade, I guess, a big procession was following him. A lot of people. He was very popular about this time, and it was about the time when the Passover was to be celebrated. So Jews were coming in from all around, and the road going from leading into Jericho and then leading on up to Jerusalem, that was the road that they ordinarily traveled. And so people, as they began coming toward Jerusalem, they would get on the Jericho road. That brought them right through Jericho and right up the hill then to Jerusalem. And this was a great, great time for them. And so that probably is one of the big reasons why there were so many people in this procession, because a multitude of people were following him. As he came along, just before he got into the city of Jericho, there was a blind beggar. And he heard that Jesus was coming. And as Jesus passed, this blind beggar shouted out and said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Well, you know what the crowd said. Shut up. Quite literally, they told him to keep quiet. You know, stop and think about this. Here is Jesus. Now, very popular. The triumphal entry took place just a very short time after this. Big procession of people. Everybody's interested. Oh, we've got an important man coming. We have a man coming to our city. You'll give him the key to the city. We ought to treat him with all kinds of dignity and showmanship and all of this sort of thing. You know why? He's an important fellow. And now here's this beggar have mercy on me. He doesn't have time for you. He's an important man. He's not just a plain old ordinary man. But he shouted out again. He said, Lord, have mercy on me. And Jesus asked him, said, what do you want? And the man just said simply, Lord, I want to see. Well, it would be foolish for me to say I've never been blind, obviously. I think it would be a very, very difficult time, a very difficult life to be blind. I did have this happen to me. I was in Virginia with my daughter a few years ago. I was sitting in the living room there, and all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, I went completely blind in my left eye. And I mean, there was no light or anything, and I wondered if my eyelid had gotten paralyzed and dropped down. And so I asked my daughter, I said, are my eyes open? I can see through my right eye, but I can't see anything in my left eye. And she said, yeah, your eyes are open. I said, well, Carol, I can't see anything out of my left eye. And we went to the hospital. It came back, and it turned out not to be a permanent thing. But I do remember something about that experience, and that is, I was really terrified. I really was terrified at the idea of losing sight in one of my eyes. And I found out what had happened and so forth, and, well, got my sight back without any trouble. Can't you just picture this fellow, Bartimaeus, and Lord, I just want to see. And Jesus said, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. I wonder about the people then who basically said to him, keep quiet, don't bother him. He's too important a man. You're just a beggar, a blind beggar. You don't amount to anything. But to Jesus, he amounted to something. Well, Jesus goes on into Jericho, and there's a crowd, big crowd of people, big crowd of people. I've wondered sometime, what kind of people made up this crowd? Well, when you get a crowd of people together and a prominent person, Jesus as a, quote, a religious leader now, when all of this takes place, Jesus is popular, what kind of people were there? Well, I think sometime, you remember the parables by the sea, Matthew 13? I wonder what kind of people were there. And Jesus speaks about the kind of people who were there at that time. And it seems that when we get a crowd of people together like this who are following a prominent person, we have some very peculiar things. Maybe some of them were just curious. You know, I've heard a bunch of stuff about this fellow. I'm going to just tag along here and hang around and just kind of, you know, satisfy my curiosity. I'm not a religious man. I don't care anything about what he's saying, but, you know, I just kind of like to see what's going on here. There are probably some people like that. Not really interested, but nevertheless, they were following along. Then perhaps there were some people who, and there are some people like this. I just like to be around important folks, you know. I just like to be in the company of important people. I remember when Ronald Reagan was elected, Betty and I happened to have been right close to to Century City for some reason or another at the time that all the tallies were coming in. And one of us said, I don't remember which one, why don't we just go over to Century City and see what's going on in the Century Plaza Hotel? So we did. We went in there, and surely enough, they had this big gathering. We just walked in and enjoyed the party, you know, so to speak. Curious, yes. Interested, yes. But We didn't particularly care about the idea of being around important people, but you know there's some people like that. They like to be in the presence of important folks. And so there probably were some people like that. Well, there probably were some other people there too. Here is a man who is a religious leader among the Jews. And now here comes Jesus. He got quite a following. Maybe I better kind of hook up with him, you know, because he's a religious leader and it looked like he got a big following. This may be an opportunity for me. All kinds of things like that. And then I'm quite sure that there were some people who were very honest, very sincere, and seeking, wondering what this man had to offer that could make them better, truth seekers. Now, maybe some of the curious became truth seekers. Maybe some of those who wanted to be there because of the importance of the man, maybe they became truth seekers. I'm not trying to say that these were exactly this way or that way, but I am trying to see there were different kinds of people. Now, it brings me to this point, though. What kind of a follower am I? What kind of a follower of Christ am I? Do I just like the people who are in church? Do I just enjoy this, that, or the other about church? Or am I a truth seeker? Am I really trying to be what God wants me to be? And then all of a sudden we come to the star of the show. All of a sudden here is this little short guy. I don't know how big he was, but the Bible says he was a little short fella. And now there's going to be this momentous encounter. But what kind of a fellow was he? Not very good. A publican. Publicans were, they were the tax collectors. And the Jews and the Romans, oh, they really did not have very good relationships. The Jews felt like that the Romans were unfairly taxing them, taxing them and all of that. And, oh, now here's a Jew, and he went to work for the Romans. What does he do? He collects taxes. Collects taxes. To the Jews, that's a sellout. He sold out his nation. And what they would do, the areas of the country would be divided up, and then the right to collect taxes in this area right here would be auctioned off. And the right to collect taxes over here the same, and over there the same. And sometimes these wealthy people would buy the right to collect taxes in a particular area, and then they would hire other men to actually go out and do the thing, and they would, you know, commissions and all this sort of thing, but there was not very much control over this thing. And so sometimes they would assess them much in excess of what they should, and then they'd keep a heavy profit. And so the Jewish people just despise these men, these tax collectors. Well, here's Zacchaeus. He's a tax collector. That's the reason that these folks were spoken of as sinners. And Jesus ate with publicans and sinners. So here's Zacchaeus, this little short guy. And big crowd, he just couldn't get to the front of the line, you know, because of the crowd. So he did the next best thing. He climbed a tree. Climbed a sycamore tree, and as Jesus came by, Jesus stopped. And he looked up in that tree, and what did he say? Well, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to eat with you today. Oh boy, that was the wrong thing to say. That was the wrong thing to say. Now, everybody comes up and says, oh, this man Jesus, he eats with sinners. He eats with publicans. And with some people, this was really a this was really a bad thing. Let's pause here for a moment. When Zacchaeus died, what was the epitaph on his grave? You know, when we go through a graveyard and we look at some of the statements on the gravestones, they describe what someone thought of that person. Well, I made a list of some things like that might be for people in the Bible. Here's Naaman. You remember the story of Naaman, the leper? Well, on his gravestone it says, "Here lies Naaman the leper." That's what he was remembered for, being a leper. Here lies Lazarus, the beggar. Here lies Bartimaeus, a blind man. Well, here lies Peter, a fisherman. But wait, that changed a little bit. If he had died at one point in his life, that's what people would say. Well, here's Peter, a fisherman. But later, after he met Christ, after he spent 3 years with Christ, and then the rest of his life with Christ, it wouldn't be Peter the fisherman. It would probably be Peter the Christian, Peter the apostle, Peter the rock, Saul of Tarsus, the persecutor. But later it would be Saul, the apostle and servant of Christ. What's he going to be with me? What's he going to be with you? No, they're not going to have a slogan on my grave because I'm going to be cremated. But what would people say about you, about me? Well, here is, let's just call it XYZ. That'll be everybody's name. Here lies XYZ, a servant of Jesus Christ. Here lies XYZ, fine businessman. Here lies XYZ, the old grouch. all kinds of ideas, yeah, you see. Here lies Zacchaeus, the publican. Here lies Zacchaeus, the hated, wealthy tax collector. What would they have said about Jesus? Here lies Jesus, the impostor. Here lies Jesus, the King of the Jews. Here lies Jesus, the miracle worker. Here lies Jesus, the friend of sinners and publicans. Jesus, the teacher. Jesus, the unconventional religious leader. Here lies Jesus, the man of love and compassion. What's he going to be with me? What's he going to be with you? How am I going to be remembered? Well, Zacchaeus is remembered to us as the publican who was determined to see Jesus. I've wondered why. I don't know. Why did he want to see Jesus? I don't know, but the fact is that's what he wanted. There were barriers in his way. There are always barriers in our way as we seek Jesus. There are always side roads that lead off one direction or another. There are always the things that beckon us. I'm a little guy. I can't see over the crowd. I think I'll forget it and go home. There are all kinds of barriers. One of the things about Zacchaeus and Jesus' encounter with this little man was that Zacchaeus did not allow the barriers to stand between him and what he wanted to do about Jesus. I think that the whole thing was a big surprise to him when Jesus is walking along here, you know, in this big crowd and so forth, and he stopped and he says, Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm going to eat with you today. I expect Zacchaeus was embarrassed. I expect he was surprised, all kinds of things. But the important thing about this encounter was, and I don't know why, I wish I did, but for some reason or another, to be in the presence of Christ was an enormous experience for Zacchaeus. And so he said to the Lord, Lord, half my goods I give to feed the poor. Lord, if I have wrongly extracted money from anybody, I give them more than what I owed them. It's interesting, I think, to stop and think about, was Zacchaeus saying, this is what I've been doing, I'm a good man, I'm an honest man? Or is he saying, your presence, being in your presence, has changed my whole life? That's what I think. Not that I have been good, but I will become good. There's a moment of truth here that comes. A moment of truth when all of a sudden this man sees himself as Jesus sees him. Maybe for the first time, he sees himself that way. A while back I read a poem by James Russell Lowell, and it was called The Present Crisis. And it was a poem that was written shortly after the Civil War, the American Civil War. And it described some of the immense problems of that age. And I wrote down just a couple of lines from the poem. Once to every man and nation there comes a moment to decide. The strife of truth against falsehood, and for good or evil to side. They enslave their children, he said, and their children's children, who make a compromise with sin. Folks, being in the presence of Christ changed the life of Zacchaeus. Sometimes just the touch of someone who cares means so much to us. I'm sure you've heard this poem probably 100 times before, but I'm going to write it. This is 101, okay? The touch of the Master's hand. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time with an old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks, he said. Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, $1, and then $2. Who'll make it $3? $3 once, $3 twice. Going for $3, but no. From the room far back, an old gray-haired man came forward and he picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loosened strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as the caroling angels sing. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, in a voice that was quiet and low, said, what am I bid for this old violin? And he held it up with the bow. $1,000. Who'll make it two? $2,000, and who'll make it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, we do not quite understand. What changed its worth? But swift came the reply. It was the touch of the Master's hand. Many a man with life out of tune, who is battered and scarred with sin, is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going, he's almost gone. But the Master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought by the touch of the Master's hand. Folks, there are some people in this world that need the touch of the Master's hand. And his hand is only found as your hand and my hand. The compassion we show, the interest and the love that we communicate, the way we carry our lives, the relationships that we have. Sometimes just a word can mend all kinds of broken hearts, can tear down all kinds of barriers, and can make people what God intended that they be. Zacchaeus and Christ, the little man who would not allow the barriers that were natural to him. He's short. He wouldn't allow those barriers to stand between him and seeing the Lord. Let's not let barriers keep us away from Christ. We're going to sing an invitation song. If you are in any way subject to the invitation of Christ, you'll be baptized into Christ this evening. The invitation is yours. Let's stand together while we sing, please.